Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode on the Age for Waves podcast with your host, Annabelle. Today's going to be a special one, guys. I kind of teased it in my painting video that I uploaded just a few days ago. But we're back with the main episode, and this time it's all about the sports media. The sports media that includes the coverage of sports, the broadcasting, the talking about it all. We'll talk about some media that certain teams and certain sports get. And to help me explain sports media, to help me kind of understand and fully comprehend what goes on behind the scenes, what we see versus what other people might not see, is one of the biggest sports nerds that I have ever met in my life. It's my brother, the one and only Michael Schneider. How are you feeling today?
Hey, we're doing pretty well. We're doing
That's
good.
awesome. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you think you know sports media?
Pretty well,
You
I
think
would
so?
say.
What would you give yourself on a scale of 1 to 10?
I'd probably give like an 8 or 9.
I wouldn't disagree with that. So, sports media, the definition technically of sports media is the reporting, broadcasting, and coverage of sports news, events, and coverage that are related. So, we've seen it. I've seen coverage of the NFL. We're going to dive into that. I've seen the sports media talk about the NBA, the NHL, the MLB, tennis, Major League Soccer, all that stuff. We'll cover a few of those topics today, and then I'll conclude on the big question, which is the media oversaturated? Meaning, are we being fed too much of sports media in the year 2025? So, to kick things off, I say we dive right into the NFL and sports media. Does that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, media and the NFL specifically, obviously, we hear all the talk about what goes on during the season. We hear a little bit of stuff in the preseason as well. But where the real juicy stuff comes is the off season, and specifically free agency and re signing players. And one team in particular, which I know has been the case for a few years now, is a team who doesn't seem to do well, go after players in free agency, and is notorious for waiting to sign players to their contracts. And that is America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. How would you describe? I'm going to ask a big Cowboys fan this question, which you might not like, but Michael, how do you feel about the way the Cowboys are talked about and portrayed in the media specifically?
Yeah, Cowboys are talked about a lot in the media standpoint. They just, um, I would just say, yeah, they're just talked about over, like just all the information thrown into any show or anything, any article, whatever is going to be talked about the Dallas Cowboys pretty much. Just because we got a lot of hype and we got a lot of like a team's going to have a lot of sports media or just people following them, just because they expect high expectations from them every single year. And so yeah,
Would you agree, though, that they don't do well in free agency?
uh, the past couple years, no, but I think previous years, I think we've done okay. Now the last 2 years have been noticeable and how bad it's been. So yeah.
So why do you think do you think the Cowboys get talked about so much because of America's team, or because they have so much pressure and expectations that come with being a Dallas Cowboy? Or is it just a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both, I think, just with, you know, being, winning a lot of Super Bowls in the 90s and then those expectations from the 90s have carried on to now here in 2025 and they've carried on since then, I guess. And so they just high expectations, especially being the richest team. Like, I mean, Jerry Jones has a ton of money and we're the richest franchise in sports history. So you're always gonna have expectations when you have that on you.
I want to jump to the defense of Cowboys fans because I saw people starting the discourse about Dak Prescott, which we'll get into in a minute. But I'm under the belief that the 2024 Cowboys season was not entirely Dak Prescott's fault. I mean, yes, he looked bad for a couple of games, but the whole team looked bad. And it's not his fault that he had a season ending injury to his hamstring of all things. One person who I can blame for the Cowboys' fail of a season is Jerry Jones for not setting his team up for success. And I guess to a certain degree, also Mike McCarthy, even though I still do think he was treated kind of unfairly in Dallas. But I don't know what goes on in Jerry Jones's head. I don't know what goes on with the Cowboys team as a whole. But I do think that the discourse surrounding Dak Prescott wasn't warranted, I guess, catered towards him specifically for the Cowboys lackluster of a season. Do you like how the media portrays Dak Prescott?
Yeah, they really just highlight him because I mean, quarterback's the most important position in the NFL, and Dak's the quarterback for the Cowboys, so he's going to get a lot of talk about in the media and get criticized a lot.
And people are entitled to criticism. I'm not gonna go here and say that Dak was perfect last season because he wasn't, but all the quarterbacks in the NFL are not perfect. And that includes the elite quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow. Even though they're very good players, they are still entitled to criticism and they are still going to have off days. So we can't just expect one player to play to very high standards while the elite quarterbacks get a pass. I think everyone needs to be held to the same standard, and that includes other lesser quarterbacks like Will Levis and Bryce Young. So enough of the NFL. Sports media and the MLB now, it's not taught to the discourse I've seen on social media and even just the news in general doesn't really highlight certain areas of the MLB. But I do know that the Shohei Ohtani discourse from last year and a few years ago was a big topic of discussion. What can you speak and allude to for that, Michael?
With just the Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah, when he was caught, I guess, stealing money or got money stolen from him.
Yeah, I think yeah,
Was that it?
I'm not entirely sure on the Shohei Ohtani thing, but this kind of I guess I'm gonna just go with just kind of similar with the Cowboys with the Dodgers again. They're probably America's team for baseball. Them or the Yankees, I
Mm-hmm.
probably would say. But yeah, Shohei Ohtani had a lot of expectations coming from Japan to United States, and him playing on the Angels, and now he's on the Dodgers, and so yeah, just being pretty. I mean, he's a great player, fun player to watch. Plays both sides of the ball, defense, pitches and bats. So it's pretty cool to see that.
What's the standard that you think the media holds MLB players to? Because we know it's a lot different from football players, and football and baseball is not the same sport. Do you think there's a standard that MLB players should reach or should accomplish by the end of their season?
Yeah, I think so. I think just, with the difference between NFL and MLB is like you can lose more games in the MLB. Like every game counts, but again, like, you could lose 60 MLB games to be the best team in the best in the MLB, but in in football it's a lot different just with you have less games to play, so you have to play good every single game. You can have a couple bad nights in baseball and you're not going to get talked about as much. But if you have two bad games in NFL, you're going to be talked about more than if you have two bad games in MLB, just because the lengths of the seasons are different.
I don't know I obviously know that the MLB season runs from late March till essentially October when the World Series happen. So that's about a 5-ish month,
5 to 6.
5 to 6 month period in which players have to either redeem themselves from a few bad games or they have a chance to maintain consistency throughout those 5 to 6 months. So I think that is a long period to not just be expected to play well, but also have the whole team be unified throughout those 5 to 6 months. And with the NFL season, that's only about 3 months, would you say? 3 or 4, give or take?
It's about 4 to 5.
Or 4 to 5. Is it that longer than what I thought it was? Oh, my okay. So they're about almost the same period. The MLB is a little bit longer, but that's more games.
They
And
play they play 5 to 7 games a week.
yeah,
So
so that's there. But what comes with that also is the more you play games, the more you're exposed to injury and stuff, which is natural and it happens, and injuries happen with every sport. Do you think injuries are more common in baseball or in football?
um I would I would kind of I don't really know that, but I would probably say
If you
kind of
had
can
to,
go both ways, but I think football would lean towards that just because it's a more physical sport. So
mhm.
if any injury, it would just I mean, Tommy John surgery is a big one in pitching for just for pitchers. But yeah, I definitely can see with the long season you can get injuries in the MLB. But I think yeah, NFL gets them as well.
Mhm.
I think a little more
Do you think it's more common in the NFL than the MLB?
by a little
By a
bit,
little
but
bit.
not too much.
See, because I know concussions are like pretty common in the NFL, which is like a unfortunate thing to say, but it is kind of like true. But you can also get concussions in baseball, I feel like, right? If you get like a drive to the head or something.
Yeah, there's times you can get a concussion. So yeah.
I feel like concussions actually would be more prominent in baseball because you're not wearing your helmet out in the outfield. You just have a baseball cap. But I'm not an expert in baseball, so I don't know. However, so one more question for you before I move on. Who do you have being the best team in baseball this year?
Uh, only answer is the Dodgers because they have
Hmm.
so much money and they actually use it wisely.
Unlike the Cowboys.
Yeah,
So
like
I'm
the
just kidding.
Dodgers.
I'm sorry.
Dodgers go all in. They got a bunch of great players. So yeah, I think it would be the Dodgers.
See, the fan person in me wants to say the Chicago Cubs, being a Cubs fan, but I know that's not true. I know they just lost a game. I know they're not going to be better than the Milwaukee Brewers in the NL Central. So I can't say that. I unfortunately would have to hop onto that train and say the Dodgers, or I don't think we can outrule the Yankees yet either, but we'll see. Moving on from baseball, I want to talk basketball here. And there's two sides of the basketball world. There's college basketball, the NCAA, and the MLB, the National Basketball Association, where players such as Steph Curry, LeBron James, and Kevin Durant exist. So let's start with the NBA first. Do you think that media's portrayal of the NBA is fair? Does the media treat NBA players fairly occasionally?
I think so. It kind of also depends on the player as well and how they've been playing recently and stuff like that. I know the media was going crazy over the Luka Doncic trade. That was a big shocker to send Anthony Davis to the Mavericks. Like that was just a big one that kind of shocked sports media and just a lot of people in general. So, but I think overall, like, yeah, it kind of depends on the person and how, their seasons went. So,
Do you think is that the end of your
mm,
line of discussion there? Okay. So out of the big three, so we have LeBron James, Steph Curry, KD, Kevin Durant. Out of all those three players, who do you think gets more scrutinized the most in the media when talked about?
probably LeBron James,
And why would you say that?
just because, he's just been around the league so much. He's been talked about for many, many years and stuff like that. And will he be able to play for a couple more years? Or there's just been a lot of question marks with him and how far he can go. And so yeah.
See, I actually think the player who gets scrutinized the most out of the big three is Kevin Durant. And I say that because obviously he's one of the best power forwards that the basketball world has ever seen. I don't think that's a far stretch. What I do know, however, is that Steph Curry has won titles before with one team. LeBron has won titles with the Cavaliers and with the Lakers, I believe. And Kevin Durant has not won a title since his time in Golden State and has since moved to play for the Nets and the Suns and still hasn't found success there. And when the media talks about Kevin Durant's legacy, unfortunately, it's going to be taught his the two titles that he won with Golden State, and that was with Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. So he hasn't really found that success outside of Golden State. And I think that gives him more criticism in the world and the in sports media where you can play the best position on your team and you can play the best position in the league, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be equivalent to wins. It's not going to be equivalent to overall production. So I would like to see the media's portrayal and I guess impression of Kevin Durant kind of shift a little bit, meaning that he is a leader on the court. I truly believe so. I believe he's a leader off the court. I believe he's the best player for the Suns. And if not, then he's a close second or a third. But he's still elite, regardless of how many titles he has or not. Moving on to the NCAA, one of the big deals last year, but especially this year, is NIL deals for college basketball athletes. What is your first impression of NIL in general?
Yeah, NIL is just, it's getting to the point where they need to set boundaries. Because it's been getting out of hand really quickly and rapidly and kind of just yeah, it's been pretty bad. I think just there needs to be a boundary where each conference, like there's teams that have more money than other teams. It's like pretty obvious, but I think that there needs to be a boundary on each conference can spend a certain amount of NIL on each season. It can't exceed that limit. Um, Not just saying like because the SEC and Big Ten have a lot of money, so they can spend more money, but they need to spend it like roughly the same amount as everybody else because if it's not going to be controlled like that, like each conference can have a certain amount of NIL money they can put, or just have, like then it's going to ruin the sport in a couple years, and it kind of already is right now. Just it's going to come down to, especially with the NCAA tournament right now, there's no upsets right now. You can clearly tell there's no upsets, and that's going to continue if this doesn't get controlled and managed well because all these mid-major schools, like these small D1 schools, have these great players on their teams, and they're leaving their schools now because they want to get more money from a bigger Power Five school and get more recognition than playing at a smaller school. I can name a lot of players that have been able to do that and make more money. Like the two big men for Michigan, Danny Wolf and Vladimir Golden, both played not they played in the non Power Five. They played at Yale and FAU, and they moved to Michigan, and they're showcasing their abilities there. And those were tough losses for the mid-major schools. JT Toppin for Texas Tech went to New Mexico, transferred over to Texas Tech. He's having a great year. And there's a lot more other players, but I think there needs to be a boundary on each conference has a certain amount of NIL that they have each year, and they can spend that instead of teams just loading up on money like the blue bloods who have a ton of money that can just spend as much money as they want and get any player that they pretty much want. And so that's what it's come down to. So it just needs to be managed a lot better, or else there's going to be thousands of people in the transfer portal. So yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna counter two of your points right there. The first one being, I do think there were some upsets in the NCAA tournament, like Drake beat Missouri, and Drake was a lower seed than Missouri. So can we classify that technically as like an
Yeah,
upset? Or
I'm
are you talking
talking, I'm
about just
talking
the
more,
rounds?
more advanced. Like
Okay,
you can just tell in the Elite Eight, like there was 110 seed in it. Like if
okay.
you look from this year to the last 4 or 5 years, this tournament is just full of like 1 and 2 seeds. Like the lowest seed in the Elite Eight right now is a 3 seed. And like previous years, I mean, 8, 9 seed, 5 seeds, whatever. But NIL, I feel like is having a factor on that because these mid-major schools are losing their top players to go to bigger schools, and they're struggling they're getting the short end of the stick on these things. So you can, yeah,
Here, since you have your computer out right now, since I'm recording on mine, do a Google search quickly and see how many seeds were in the Sweet 16 last year and see if there was any double digit seeds. So we can kind of fact check that. Well, I prove to my second point of that being, while I do agree that there needs to be boundaries with the NIL, but it's like what I kind of mentioned in my like painting video that I did just a couple days ago is that I don't think there's anything wrong with players go entering the transfer portal. And I talked about this. You commit to a school to play your designated sport after high school, or sometimes if you're going over traveling overseas and you're going to a college to play college hoops. You want to play the sport that you signed up to play for and that you committed for. So when you don't get the minutes that you think you've earned or deserved, when you don't get the playing time, I think that warrants enough um I think that warrants enough credibility and accountability to say, you know what? I want to go to a school where my talents and my efforts are recognized. And someone who comes to mind for that is Iowa State guard Nate Heisey, who played at UNI for 3 years. UNI is Missouri Valley Conference team slash Missouri Valley Conference team, the same conference as Drake. They are not on the Missouri Valley Conference is not one of the elite conferences. They're not the SEC. They're not the Big Ten. They're not the Big 12. They're not the ACC. They're not top major. They are pretty mid-major college. But Heisey said that he wanted to have the chance to play a tournament in March, which is why he transferred from UNI to come to Iowa State to have a fighting chance for that. And the Cyclones did make the big tournament. They did make the big dance. So I see where he's coming from there. But again, I don't think we can necessarily fault players for wanting a chance to play. But there is the money aspect of that as well, which is kind of what Michael alluded to before. So, did you find anything else?
yeah. Last year, so this year there is all 1 seeds are in the Elite Eight.
Okay.
There's 3 2 seeds, and there's 1 3 seed.
And that 1 through seed is that's a
Like,
SEC, if I'm not
and there's
mistaken. Correct. So,
yeah,
who are all the 1 seeds? So, that's Houston, Duke, Auburn, and who
Florida.
else? Florida.
Yep.
And out of I'd say those 4 teams have the best shot of making the Final Four.
Mm-hmm.
And what about last year?
And then last year, 2 1 seeds made it.
2 1 seeds, okay.
There was 1 2 seed,
1 2 seed,
1 3 seed,
1 3 seed,
1 4 seed, a five, 2 4 seeds,
2 4 seeds.
1 6 seed, and an 11 seed.
And who was that 11 seed?
North Carolina State, which they made a good run. They made a good run in the conference tournament, and then they were able to make it to the Final Four as well. So there was 2 1 seeds that made the Final Four and a 4 seed and an 11 seed. So
Last year was North Carolina State was the Cinderella of last year.
This
And
year you can't really say there was a Cinderella at all. If you want to count Arkansas, you can, but I wouldn't really consider it
I
one. I think
wouldn't.
a 10 seed won't be considered a Cinderella, but
So that goes to speak on NIL, right? Kind of to a degree.
yeah. And there's been a couple big transfers from mid-major schools like Donovan Dent from New Mexico. They pulled off an upset. He is going to UCLA.
Hmm.
So New Mexico player that was one of the best players in the mid-major in the Mountain West transferred over to UCLA. So that's a big loss for New Mexico, and that's hard to regain for those teams, especially those small schools, because they just don't have a lot of money, and those other players are going to go to a bigger school, get bigger recognition, get more money, get more value and stuff like that. So, and there's been a lot more people on the fence with transfer portals. So
I'm actually curious to hear your take on this because this is something I have thought for a while. What do you, how do you feel about players transferring to another school in the same conference?
um, I think I mean a couple of years ago, if you would have told me that, I'd be like, oh, that's kind of crazy. But now it's kind of came to it's just kind of more a common theme now, just with
Mm.
NIL and so many people going to the transfer portal that they just change teams from conferences. I mean, it just kind of happens. And I think, 3, 4 years ago, that'd been kind of surprising, but now it's really not a surprise anymore.
Here, I want you to do one more Google search and see which school has the most NIL money, just
It's
quickly.
probably,
Or,
I could probably name you a couple teams right
okay,
off my head.
okay, name some.
Probably is Texas,
Oh,
Louisville, Kentucky, Duke, um SEC, any SEC school really, like Florida or Tennessee, Auburn, those teams. I could probably look it up here really quick if you want me to,
why do you say Louisville? That's not a team that would come to
but
mind for me.
they had 11 or 12 transfers last year.
Okay,
So they just had a lot of NIL and
here, hold on, I'm gonna
collecting
get my
players.
drink
So,
quickly.
but that's just for college basketball. Football, Texas, Bama.
Mm.
Gonzaga is another one that looks up with the most NIL money. Number
For
one.
football?
No,
Oh,
for
basketball?
basketball.
Uh, That makes
Basketball, it's
sense.
Gonzaga, Duke, Kentucky,
Hmm.
Carolina, Kansas, Michigan, Ohio State, Baylor, Louisville,
Okay.
Villanova.
Mm,
Just kind of those blue bloods. Football
yeah.
would be Texas, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Alabama, LSU, just those schools, Michigan. So
Yeah. I didn't have a talking point about college football, but maybe that'll be a topic of discussion in the future for that. And then one more thing, or move on from the NCAA and then maybe hit one more big sport before the big question. So the coaching in college basketball right now. I know there's three big storylines for coaching. Fran McCaffrey being fired from the Iowa Hawkeyes. Darian DeVries leaving West Virginia to go coach at Indiana, I believe. And then Ben McCollum leaving Drake to go be Iowa's coach. And I was telling you this earlier this morning, actually, when we were out golfing, is that one of Iowa's 2025 commits decommitted from Iowa following the recent coaching change. And you were telling me that's because of one particular reason. And why is that?
it's just because they didn't commit to Ben McCollum, they committed to Fran McCaffrey. So, I mean, usually when that happens, a coaching change happens, the recruits that you have coming in are probably going to leave and go somewhere else. It's just typically how it is because they originally wanted to play for the coach that left. So it's pretty common for them to leave because they don't want to play for the coach that's there now. So,
And that's not to Ben McCollum particularly. I mean, I do think he's going to be a great coach for Iowa. You saw what he did with Drake. Drake went 30-3 last season. So they're obviously good. But again, you commit because you want to play for a coach, not a different coach. And I also saw that Indiana has zero players left on their team because either they've graduated or they've entered the transfer portal as well. So it's kind of sad that that's the route that college basketball has taken because even like 5, 6 years ago, you would have never heard of stuff like this before.
Yeah.
So we'll see we'll see how the media of college basketball shifts next season, and even I guess with football as well, following the playoffs, which they changed the format for the college football playoffs. But that's something we'll talk about in the future. One more sport I have is Major League Soccer. We don't really talk about soccer that much. I don't watch a lot of soccer. What I can say though is that I think soccer players are treated kind of unfairly in the media, especially if you're not one of the greatest of all times, like Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. So that's my take. But I do know that my brothers are big hockey fans. They love to watch hockey. They watch a lot of NFL. Can you explain what Major League Hockey is to someone who might not be familiar with it, Michael? Since you're more expertise in that area than I am.
Yep. Just what it is. Hot NHL, National League Hockey, or National Hockey League. And mainly the teams, you see a team from Toronto, usually from the NBA or MLB, but there's more teams from Canada. I think there's probably 8 to 10 teams from Canada, I think, in NHL. So yeah, a bunch of those teams. So it's just more Canadian teams. But
Mhm.
yeah, which makes sense.
Do you think, I want your honest opinion here. Do you think hockey gets talked about enough in the media compared to all these other sports?
It really doesn't. It's not
Hmm.
too much of a common sport, but upper like in the northern states, it's more talked about just because, it's colder out. You got ice out, and just that's just what it is. And hockey's a great sport to play when it's cold out and you got a frozen pond or whatever and want to play or something. So
Does hockey deserve to be talked about as much as basketball and football is in sports media, do you think?
uh I don't know if it really should or not, just
Mm.
because, sometimes when sports take off and they're up so high, it's really hard to put another sport up there with those. But um, yeah, I think I mean, it's a it's a unique sport, and yeah,
You watch the Blackhawks though a lot, don't
yeah.
you?
I
Mm-hmm.
watched the Blackhawks.
And what's
Disappointment.
and what's their record?
21-43-9.
Oh, are they the worst team in hockey
They're
though?
the second worst. So,
So, but they're not the worst.
but they're pretty close.
Who's the worst? Do you know that
The
off the top of your
San
head?
Jose Sharks from
Oh,
California.
and what's their record? Or do you not know that?
They are 20-42.
Oh, so the Blackhawks are what? 2 games better? 1 game better?
Yeah, something like that.
Oh, I bet it's hard to win in hockey though, because if you think about it, these other sports don't, you're not on ice. So you don't have to like adjust your feet or and stuff when you're on ice. And then there's a lot of movement going around too and such. So I've also seen a lot of hockey fights, but that was minor league hockey when I went to go see a game here close in Cedar Falls. So we'll leave that to it as well. But we finally reached the big question that I've been wanting to ask you. We've talked about the NBA, we've talked about the NFL, we hit on the NIL, detailed hockey a little bit, got into the MLB. So my big question to you, Michael, is the media oversaturated? Do we get fed too much of the sports media? And does the media oversell their talking points?
Yeah, I think it does. You kind of oversell their points. I think just with first take, get up, all the sports talks that they talk about, they got a lot of information they talk about, and yeah, I think those are the two main ones I would say for sports media.
Is there a way to change that, do you think?
I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure on that one. I think that you can though, but you know,
I think, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, I do think bias plays a major factor in all of media,
Hmm.
whether or not it's intended to or not, whether or not it's intentional. But I do think the media is oversaturated. That doesn't necessarily mean media is awful or terrible, but it does get to a point where you kind of oversell your points and eventually it does become old news. So, but that's just part of what people in the media do, and that is their career, that is their job, it is their profession. So I can't hold that against them too much. But but as consumers of the media, we do play a role in that as well. We are the ones who are watching these clips on YouTube or on TikTok. We are the ones turning on our TVs to watch certain sports. So we are consumers of the media. We are feeding into the media. It's just kind of the cycle of the media and the industry that the media is in has its pros and cons. And I don't know if there's like a clear white line in between those two. So I think that wraps up our discussion points there. Anything else you want to add before we conclude?
I don't think so. Nope.
All right. Well, guys, that was episode, I believe, 17 of this podcast or 16. I don't know. I'm not, I forgot. So you'll see the episode number on your screen on YouTube and on Spotify. But Michael, thanks so much for being here.
Yep. Thank you.
I had this was a blast. And thank you for being my expert in some of these areas that I'm not quite familiar with.
Hmm.
So, for that, guys, thanks again for watching or listening to the podcast. You can check out other episodes on Spotify and on YouTube. You can find the podcast, I believe, on Instagram now. I'll plug in Michael's social media stuff as well if you want to look at that. And I'll catch you guys on the next episode. Bye.